Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast. I am Race for the Prize. Let's continue our preparation for the 2024 Cup Series Richmond race. And as I have done in previous videos, I'm leaning on Phoenix. You can tell that I am more concerned with the 2024 Phoenix results and the new package than I am for Richmond 2 or Richmond 1 last season. That to me, that does not mean that I'm dismissing those data points. I will also factor that in, but I think Phoenix is where we really need to go. You can see the optimal lineup. You can see top 10 fantasy scores. Bell, Truex, Gibbs gave us a little bit of savings. Reddick, it's a Toyota show. Chris Buescher, average running position is second. Finishes second. If you watched the previous video, he was having a decent day, but a strategy call at the end definitely inflated that finish. And I want to call caution to that. Of course, we're going to like Buescher this week because he put on a magnificent, magnum opus, dominant performance at Richmond last fall. Not so good in the spring, but in the second race really was in his groove. And then you're going to look at the second place finish, boost him even more. Be careful. The RFK Fords were good. We'll talk more about it, but maybe not as good as we think. Blaney ends up finishing fifth. Really good at the very end of the Phoenix race. Did it hit on something? He was able to make passes. But again, he was passing drivers that were on old tires at the end. Either way, he was able to complete those passes. Hamlin finishes 11th, average running position of 6th. Not good on restarts, great on pit road. Also had that spin at the end. Chastain, an inflated finish. Your best Chevy at 6th, but that was a strategy call at the end. Gillen plays the strategy game, but he ran well all day. Average running position of 18th. Goes with the strategy, still is able to finish where he should. McDowell slightly inflated with the strategy call at the end, saving fuel. Same thing for Briscoe. Bubba Wallace gets in that wreck at the very end. That hurts him a little bit. Suarez, ho-hum day, but that's really not bad considering the Chevys weren't all that fast. Larson, we'll talk more about that in a second. So let's break down kind of what some of the drivers said about this race. Clearly, the first thing that you need to know was the Toyotas were fast. If we look at the lap times, which we did in the previous video, the 5 fastest cars in terms of lap speed were all Toyotas. And we expect them to continue to carry that speed into Richmond unless, let's plant the seed of doubt, maybe Toyota and maybe JGR really doubled down on Phoenix, being that it will be the championship race. So there is at least a reason to believe that they may not have as much speed at Richmond. They may have devoted a lot more resources into nailing Phoenix. And so that maybe they come a little bit down to earth this week. Your bet is as good as mine on that. We will see in practice this week. At least we think we will, but you really won't see in practice this week because as I have mentioned, Group A versus Group B. Might as well throw that up on the screen. I know it's a little bit of repetition, but it's good to remind ourselves of these things. If we go back and look at Richmond last year, the Group B session drivers were able to collect a lot more data. They had a rubbered up racetrack. So point one that you need to understand, the drivers that are in Group B probably going to get better data. 2, their lap times are not going to look as good because they're dealing with a slower racetrack. And it's going to skew, and we're going to see down here, look at all these guys that were fast in practice and really didn't race. It's going to inflate some guys' performances. We're going to see drivers that look really good that aren't really that good. I mean, you've got J.J. Yeley, 12th fastest on a short run, 5-lap average. That should tell you everything you need to know. You're going to have to be aware of that this weekend. Now, if a driver you like ends up in Group A, as I mentioned previously, so yeah, this 5-lap average for Chris Buescher in Group A is going to be inflated. But if he is able to maintain that longer in the run, although this isn't the ideal situation with a fully gripped up racetrack, but to still maintain speed deep in a run, I think that is something that we can hang on to. I think Hamlin's a perfect example of Hamlin being Hamlin. Now, if we were to look at his stats and look at his specific every single lap from Richmond last year, I think there's a good chance that in his first 10 laps, he's got a punted lap that really weighs down his average. But as things cycle out 15, 20, 25, that bad lap becomes less significant. You know, obviously it's one lap out of 25, so it will weigh the averages a lot lower. That's what I'm thinking probably happened there. Good news is you will have lap-by-lap data to be able to look at that. But he doesn't check the box of pretty good speed in the long run in Group A. That is what I would look for. Back to where we were, breaking down the race. Trying to help ourselves out with some picks. Talking about the drivers. Toyota was very fast. There was a slight setup change, they said, from last year's Phoenix race to the new package, and they got it right. Having Christopher Bell test probably helped. Truex and Hamlin don't test. They're old men. I mean, Hamlin's got a lot of stuff on his plate. Truex seems like he has a lot of DGF. You're not going to get him to show up at Phoenix for a test. He doesn't have to be there. And even if you pay him, even if you give him a steak dinner, Bell's willing to test. Bell appears to be a pretty good tester. Collected the data. Thank you, Christopher, doing the hard work. Toyotas were fast. Who tested at Richmond? Christopher Bell, another really good racer at Richmond. Probably collected some really good data. So if you want to go down the route of, oh, well, they really doubled down on Phoenix, maybe. But there's a very good chance that they, again, collected really good data at Richmond, although the package was slightly different with different tires. So maybe you want to throw out that Richmond test data because it was way back in August, well before the Phoenix test. Don't mind that either. Again, they had speed. They were light years ahead of everyone else. But the real significant difference, as we went over in the previous video, where I broke down the entire race, was they had speed. Hendrick weren't necessarily slugs. I think that's going to get exaggerated this week. That will be overstated this week. But what should not be overstated is the difference between the Toyotas, mainly JGR Toyotas, but Reddick was right there as well, is that not only were Toyotas fast, they could pass. Byron had the speed to hang in the top 5. He had the speed to race with people in his package. They didn't have the setup to pass in this package. Toyota did. Christopher Bell, on the last run of the race, runs from 20th to 1st. He makes passes. Reddick is unable to pass. Hamlin does pass. Ty Gibbs gets most of his stuff on a restart at the end, but he's right up there. Clearly the guy that had the most ability were Bell, Truex. And I don't want to downgrade Hamlin. Well, why wasn't Hamlin able to pass in this race? He was. He just ran up front the entire race. So, and if you want to put Hamlin to the top based on his pit road speeds and sequencing, which will be a big factor at Richmond, then maybe you say, I don't care if Bell can pass. Hamlin's going to pass you on pit road. So it's just a degree of difference. The difference is hardly discernible. We like the Toyotas. We're going to have a soft tire again. It's going to lay down rubber, especially at Richmond. Second groove formed at Phoenix. That worked for JGR. It should work again. I know a lot of this is repetitive and I've gone over it in previous podcasts, but this is just the routine. This is the process. This is the strategy. This is what I do for a living, folks. You know, I'm in education, and if you're not going back over and doing it over and researching over and reminding yourself, then you're probably not going to remember it. I hate to break it to you, but rote memorization, repetition, drill and kill, that's the best way that your brain works. Here comes a rant. But a lot of people love discovery learning, multiple intelligence. A lot of that gobbledygook, experiential learning, project-based learning, that stuff doesn't work. You know what works? What worked for hundreds of years, rote memorization, drill and kill, repetition. And you can just think, if you're old enough, which I know most of you are, I can see the analytics. I can know how you were educated. And you had to do your times tables over and over and over and over. And now you can multiply in your head. Today, kids can't multiply in their head because they didn't do that. They were doing discovery learning about fancy numbers. It doesn't work. What works is rote memorization. That's why I go back over these things. That's why I go over drill and kill. You remember having the right spelling words over and over and over. Now you can actually spell those old school things that people hate, that get dismissed, that you hated, but it worked for you. It's not fun. The kids should be having fun. No, you got to drill and kill. You got to go back over your notes. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. It's what the research has said for the last 30 years under E.D. Hirsch. We don't want to hear about some education. You should look him up. Anyway, back to actionable content. Again, Buescher was happy, man. But if you read between the lines, he's like, I'm happy with my Ford. We did well. But if you're really looking, he wasn't super excited because he knows that his finish was slightly inflated. He wants a little bit more speed. Brad Keselowski has a pretty good day as well. Runs pretty well at the end. But he as well is saying, it's a good day, but we really had nothing for the Toyotas. If they had nothing for the Toyotas at Phoenix, then how are they going to have something for them at Richmond? Now, they did run really well at Richmond last season, and a strong case can be made that Brad Keselowski should have won that race, not for a two bad pit stops towards the end of the race. So all could be well going back to Richmond, where they seem to have a pretty good setup. But again, that setup was in a different package. Not going to completely downgrade them, but it is worth noting. Chastain also, after the race, says, well, it was fuel saving. We weren't really a sixth-place car. He's pretty honest about that. That's a concern heading into the Richmond race. Struggled at Richmond last year, but we also need to note that he was struggling everywhere at that time. After that Nashville win, again, I'm repeating some information, but you got to drill and kill this stuff. So will they get to set up right at Trackhouse? I don't know. Sometimes it looks like they put resources into other tracks. Other things worth noting, which I really think is a big deal, is the Hendrick cars. Ultimately, Bowman finishes 8th or 20th, average finish of 18th. There were spells and stints during this race where he did run well, did not put together a full race. Bowman seems to be coming a little bit better together over the last couple weeks. Maybe they're finding something. I still want to go back to a point that I make constantly, is that he has never been quite the same driver since Greg Ives left as crew chief. But with Greg Ives as a crew chief, he did win at Richmond years ago, where he ran top 5 all day and then did this classic backdoor Bowman stealing a win. No one's going to want to play him, possibly. He's not too far off. Larson had a ho-hum day, stuck in traffic, but also had 2 bad pit stops during this race that hurt him a little bit. I don't know how much we want to react to that. We don't have a really good, clear picture of what Larson had at that race. We know he won at Richmond last spring, but then you look at the second Richmond race, and they just completely missed the setup. They were tight. He was losing grip constantly. It was not a good day. When we go into this race this weekend, it's a lot of things that we don't like about Larson, which is kind of rare. I don't know how much those are going to be promoted on other podcasts, and if for whatever reason that suppresses his ownership, then maybe there's leverage there. The bigger story is Chase Elliott and William Byron, who do not have good fantasy days. Byron finishing well down the board. Where's Elliott at? Well down the board. But as you can see, their average running position was top 10. I put up their laps, and you will see that in terms of top 5 laps, they were really solid. Let's see. Elliott, 120, 40% of the race in top 5. Hendrick had speed. They couldn't pass. They didn't have the elite speed. Byron and Elliott just have a bad final stint to this race. We can look at that right here. They decide to pit. Looking at Elliott, he restarts in 18th. He goes nowhere. It happened. They had speed. They just couldn't pass. He was going to be faster than the guys that stayed out. He was faster than the guys that possibly took 2 tires. He just could never get to them in dirty air in this final run. Byron really got hurt by a pretty bad restart. We had that Bubba, Eric Jones incident, blocking people. So now Byron is in 20th, all the way back to 23rd. So this final stint makes Hendrick look like they're not very good. They were. Now Larson is his own situation. We talked about his pit road situation. Bowman is his own thing. But Byron and Elliott were really good in this race. Their finishes were harmed by that late race restart, that late race caution, and then just getting stuck in dirty air. They were top 10 cars, probably top 5 cars, but the end of the race hurt them significantly. If a bunch of normies decide that, well, Hendrick's toast, great. Probably want to jump on the Hendrick bandwagon. Last guy worth noting, again, this is repetition, but Eric Jones does not get the finish that he deserves. He had speed at times, had to overcome several issues, but ultimately gets wrecked at the end. Where's Jones at on our board? Oh, he's up here. Finishes 31st. But if you go through his lap times, they're pretty good. Again, worth mentioning, at Phoenix, we really wanted to look at the laps late in the session as opposed to the beginning. At Phoenix, they ran one big 50-minute session, everyone on the track. Track times were misleading because everyone laid down their fast stuff early in practice where the track wasn't conducive to actual racing conditions. It was closer towards the end. So if you showed minimal fall off at the end, like Christopher Bell did, then that was the top of the guys. Now, we're not going to do that this week. We're going to run A and B session. That means we're going to want to favor the B drivers because they're going to collect better data, although their stats are going to look a lot worse. Speaking of practice, let's look at Phoenix. We're not going to go through every single lap there. We'll look at Phoenix through this lens, and we'll look at finishing position, and we'll look for some practice correlation as we wrap up this Fantasy NASCAR podcast. Thanks for listening. Always leave the like. You guys have been incredibly charitable with your likes, and it has really helped grow this channel. I pump out a lot of videos. You pump out a lot of likes. The algorithm loves it. We are growing exponentially. Everything is working. It is awesome. Thanks for coming to me early in the week. And please continue to come to me during the weekend. And we'll continue to do our thing. Now, I don't know how many videos I will be able to do this weekend, being that it is Easter. I will be with the family. But if I can squeeze a 10-minute, 15-minute pick video in for you, I will, because you guys mean the world to me. Well, family means the world to me. You mean the, country to me? What's a smaller version of that statement? I don't really know. Continent. You mean the continent to me. Christopher Bell is your winner. Christopher Bell's fast in practice. Christopher Bell was fast late in practice. Busher gets you that second place finish, but as we noted, a little bit inflated. Still had a pretty good race car. I have no problem playing them. Ty Gibbs up front all day, overcomes a really slow pit stop, fades a little bit in stage 2, then that great restart at the end. Still, if you can get 22 hog points, dominator points at $8,000, why not? If the Toyotas are light years ahead of everyone and you can get the cheapest one, an argument can be made that even if he is not leading laps, he's going to be in play this weekend. Now, I know what you're saying. I think it's going to be Bell. I think it's going to be Hamlin. This is going to be your cheapest JGR driver, correct? He has top 5, so he can maximize finishing position. But remember, even if he doesn't lead laps, running in the top 5, he is going to get plenty of fast lap points. This is Richmond. Fast laps spread throughout the field, and that additional fast laps that he picks up with a lower price tag will be significant. If we continue to get Brad Keselowski at a discount, I'm going to be all about it. The nice thing with Keselowski was he was able to make some passes at the very end of the race. Is he excited about his car? No, but Keselowski always keeps things pretty close to the vest. Very rarely shares things. Does not wear his heart on his... Well, sometimes he gets emotional. But when he's talking about the actual aerodynamics and the fundamentals of the car, he doesn't reveal a lot. He seems relatively positive, but he also is reasonable in his statement that the Toyotas are better than us. So in reality, we've got Keselowski battling for a top 5 this week if all things stay the same. But again, at that price, kind of similar to the Ty Gibbs play. Blaney was able to pass at the end, was able to recover, had a good average running position. We're going to like him, but if he is as expensive as the Toyotas, like he was at Phoenix at $11,200, then that's not going to be something I want to go to. I think you're going to be overpaying. And if we're looking at practice data, yeah, he was fast in practice. Last year, or at Phoenix, I would want to look a little closer at when he was laying those laps down. I guess we can. Let's look at Blaney's last run and see how much fall off he had on his final run. Getting deep in the weeds. That's what we do in the Fantasy NASCAR podcast. So this is the Phoenix laps 50-minute session. We're almost there, guys. Not easy to do on the treadmill. So we'll look at his final run. And here it is. Not too deep in the session. Running a 28.28. Doesn't really give us a good look. Got these bad laps. There was traffic. There was an incident kind of late in practice. Not really great. Would love to see more, but then again, he really turned it on late in the race. Ross Chastain had speed in practice at Phoenix. Again, a lot of these lap times were laid down early in the session, but at the very least, he did run a 20-lap run, third on the board. I don't think he was that fast. If I remember going through, and then Ross will be right here next to Ryan Blaney. If I remember noting that, I didn't really like his speed late in the run. So he does make a run late here, 26 laps at the close of session, and these are not good times. And I remember discussing this on the Phoenix Picks pod that, boy, this Chevy just does not look that great. These times are not comparable to some of the other guys in the field. Now, on the other hand, I kind of like Larson a lot based on what he did in practice. But he had his issues. He got stuck in dirty air. I don't want to make a bunch of excuses. So practice is never going to be 100% correlation. But this is a little telling. It does explain why he's more of a 15th place car. Truex was fast. Let's see what Truex did late in the run. See if there's some correlation there. So he does go out and make a run late in practice. A little bit more fall off than he would like to have seen. Could be overstated. Would like to have seen more. But again, practice. Allen Iverson time. We got McDowell finishing 8th. Doesn't even make more than a 10-lap run. Average running position of 13th. I don't even know if we really even want to look at this practice data, if it's really even that beneficial given the different circumstances under the race. At the very least, we can look and see who did what. And so, hog dominator for Toyota, hog dominator for Toyota, hog dominator for Toyota, hog dominator for Toyota, hog dominator for Toyota. It's a little bit of a pattern there. That's something that you want to maybe lean heavily into this weekend. I think it is. What is another thing that we can look at real quick as we wrap up this quick podcast and make it a little bit worth your time? Let's look at some of these times real quick and see who's just fastest overall in terms of not just finish, but in terms of time. So we can look at the finishing position and see, all right. Again, Buescher, just 9th fastest when we look at lap times and finishes 2nd. Gibbs is fine, 5th to 3rd. Kozlowski, a little inflated. Blaney, a little bit. Truex, really hurt by strategy, by staying out. I think he definitely should have pit with the others. Definitely. Had at least a 2nd place race car. Finishes 7th. McDowell inflated. Briscoe inflated. Reddick got hurt by pitting. That final break. Hamlin spun. Gregson, no real smoke and mirrors here. Did exactly what I was supposed to do. Overall, SHR was 4. Fords were good. Maybe not great. Briscoe got a little bit more, but still, if I were to tell you Chase Briscoe, top 15 car, that's a step forward for the Stewart-Haas Racing Fords. Gregson, top 15, that's a step forward for the Stewart-Haas Racing Fords, especially if they're going to be priced in the 6K. Not a terrible day for Suarez, but did basically about what his teammate did in Ross Chastain. Although Chastain did run some pretty good lap times. That's pretty interesting. His average, he's more of a 15th place car. But when he was laying down speed, he was laying down speed. It's interesting. Larson just didn't have it. Hocevar had some issues and was in traffic for a lot of the race. I would argue he was a lot faster than 20th in terms of lap time. Adblock jumping up on us. But Wallace, Kind of a disappointing day given how fast the Toyotas were. But again, his lap times are going to be a little bit suppressed because of the incident late in the race. This is really interesting with Gillen. Man, you talk about a guy who is grinding it out and figuring things out and learning how to race in the mid-pack. He was a top 20 driver, average running position of 18th. He is learning how to just get through and get solid finishes like we've seen from other value picks in the past. He was almost always in the top 25 every single race last year. I mean, if he can move to always being a top 20 guy, that's a huge leap forward. He is really growing. The front row cars are getting better. It's going to be interesting to see where he is by the end of the year. His lap speeds were not that great, but he ran well. Byron's a guy who got hurt at the end. Hendrick, probably shouldn't worry. 7th fastest lap times. Elliott, finally moving in the right direction. Ryan Preece, remember he had to pit late in the race. He couldn't get the fuel to stretch. Again, a top 15 from a Stewart-Haas Racing Ford. Now he finishes 23rd, but he had a 12th in terms of speed. And the rest we don't really want to overreact to. They're just doing their thing. That's really not bad for Justin Haley to have around a 25th place race car in terms of speed. We kind of like that. And if we're going to get him in the 5K range, I think there's reason to believe at this point that Rick Ware Racing is improving. They are taking a step forward. And this isn't the same old Rick Ware Racing that we have seen in the past. I don't want to get too aggressive and too excited about it. But, no one knew from him going from college to Rick Ware. But they do have a connection with Front Row Sports, and they've talked about it. When they struggle, well, we're going to look at the front row data and see how we can improve. This team has taken a step forward. The nature of the racing has equalized. I think it would behoove us to do a little bit of a frame reset and not think of Rick Ware as Rick Ware that we used to see. It's only 2 cars, although he's got motorcycles he's racing, IndyCar that he's racing, and at times I'm concerned that is Rick Ware from Thomasville, North Carolina, my old Ballywick stomping grounds. Is he spread too thin? It's looking pretty good. John Nemechek, not a very good day, but his teammate with the Toyota, Eric Jones, did put together a pretty solid day. Just didn't work out for him. I'm not going to show the lap times because of the incident, but just the fact that he's able to run one of the fastest laps, ran up front at times, had his issues in traffic. I don't think anybody else is really worth noting here and going crazy about. That should be beneficial. And I think that'll do it for us. Yeah, that's good. I think it was a good, quick little podcast. Give me some information, help you out. Leave a like, subscribe, share the video. Truly blessed to have you guys listening. I love you guys. Trip to Light's fantastic.